Welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to make one of my favorite breakfast treats, blueberry oat squares. These are great for breakfast or just an anytime snack. What's great about the blueberry oat squares is it doesn't require that many unusual ingredients. But one thing I will say about the blueberry oat squares is that what you really should use are frozen wild blueberries. Why is that? Frozen wild blueberries have more flavor. They're concentrated, they're smaller. The regular sized blueberries are very watery. Don't have as much flavor. They're great for eating out of hand. They're putting on your cereal. But frozen wild blueberries have a more concentrated flavor. When I used to be Wegmans bakery trainer, all the blueberry muffins that the store made were using frozen wild blueberries. So you figure if Wegmans, one of the premier supermarkets in the world, uses them for baked goods, you should too. And they're easy to find in almost any frozen food section. So today I have one bag, which was from Trader Joe's, 12 ounces of blueberries, wild blueberries. Typically I would just use what the recipe says, which the recipe calls for 2 cups. It was 12 ounces. You end up with 1/4 cup extra, almost a 1/2 cup extra. I'm just putting them in, a little bit more blueberry filling instead of having a partial bag floating around my freezer, okay? So I'm getting these ready for to make into the filling. We're making the filling first. So I need my blueberries. I need a 1/4 cup sugar. Now you could use a 1/4 cup maple syrup. You could use a 1/4 cup of some other sugar. We typically avoid processed sugar, and lately my go-to sugar has been coconut sugar. It's sustainable, for one. It has a flavor more like raw sugar or more like a brown sugar, so it has sort of a caramely overtone, which I like. And it's lower on the glycemic index than regular sugar. So I'm taking a 1/4 cup of that. I need a 1/4 cup water. One tablespoon of lemon juice. The lemon juice helps to brighten the flavor. It just brings out the flavor of the blueberries a little bit, brightens it up a little bit. And then I have 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and 3 tablespoons of water. That is what we're going to be adding to the mixture once this comes to boiling. So while that's waiting, I'll make my little slurry. Some people have trouble with cornstarch. They say it clumps up. But if you take the precautions of mixing it with a little water, you should be fine. Typically what I do for cornstarch is for every cup of liquid, I use a tablespoon of cornstarch to get the thickness I sort of desire in most things, whether it's a sauce, whether it's a filling of some sort. So here I actually want it a little thicker than I would for a sauce. So I'm using 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. And I just stir it to dissolve the cornstarch. Now, one thing you have to make sure if you do this and then go and let it sit for a little while, some of the cornstarch will begin to settle. So before you go use it, make sure you stir it up again so any settled cornstarch is still incorporated in the liquid. So now we just have to wait. Now bringing it to a boil is doing two things. One, it's cooking off some of the liquid. And two, it is dissolving the sugar in the liquid. It is also making it hot enough when we put in our cornstarch that it'll thicken pretty quickly. And I'm going to get our cornstarch. I'm stirring it up a little bit. Now, what a lot of people do wrong is when they stir it in, they just pour it in. Well, you have to pour it in and stir at the same time. That'll help prevent the clumps. You want to get this fully incorporated all the way around and not just lumpy in one area. Now we can pull it off the heat because it's hot enough and it has thickened. And you can see it's now a beautiful thickness, sort of like a pie filling. Now we're going to set this aside to cool. While this is cooling, we're going to make our topping and our base layer. So the first thing we're going to do is get a bowl, a mixing bowl, and we're going to put all our dry ingredients in it. So I need 1.5 cups of oat flour. And if you can't find oat flour, and sometimes oat flour can be a little expensive, you can just take regular rolled oats and process them in a food processor or a blender until they form a powder, and you have oat flour. But we use oat flour sort of a lot here, so I don't do that. I like using oat flour because oat flour has a certain sweetness to it. And then I need equal amounts of rolled oats. One teaspoon of cinnamon. And we've been talking about different spices and herbs, and many herbs and spices are beneficial for you. And one of those, besides cinnamon, happens to be cardamon. But it doesn't take much to flavor a dish, especially a baked good. So we're using 1/8 of a teaspoon of cardamon. 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Three tablespoons of coconut sugar. Or you could, like I said, use maple syrup. But you'd mix if you did use maple syrup, you would put it with the liquid ingredients if you're using maple syrup. I need 1 teaspoon of salt. Now, some of you are avoiding salt. You could do this. Salt happens, you could have not used the salt. But salt has a tendency to actually make things taste a little sweeter and bring out the flavors. So that's why we put salt in a lot of things, especially baked goods. And once you have this, I'd ask you to just stir it all up, mix it all together as much as you can, all the things so that they're blended well, because we don't want a clump of sugar, we don't want a clump of cinnamon. We want things spread out before we add the liquid measurement, the liquid items. Now I'm going to add in a separate bowl all the wet ingredients. First off, 3/4 cup applesauce. We use unsweetened applesauce. 1/4 cup water. A teaspoon of vanilla. And this is a good reason why I just don't mix them all in with the dry ingredients right away, is if I did that with the vanilla, whatever the vanilla hit in the dry ingredients, it would soak that up. So you'd have a blotch of vanilla in one spot. So all we've done is ensured that our vanilla is equally dispersed amongst the liquids, and now when I add it to the large bowl, it'll incorporate better. Now we mix this well in, and you want to make sure you have no dry spots on the bottom. So you make sure it's incorporated real well until there's no dry spots. Make sure you're scraping the bottom to get all those dried spots. And this is sort of a sticky batter. It's like a thick batter. And that's fine. This we're going to use for our topping and for our base. But because it's sticky, it's sometimes a little difficult to handle. So now we're going to use an 8x8 pan. If you have a 9x9 one, you can use that too. They'll just be a little thinner. 8x8 pan. I don't grease it or anything. If you have a silicone one, that works just as well. Even better because you don't have to worry about it sticking to the bottom. But I'm using this ceramic one today. So what you're going to do is take half the batter and you're going to spread that in the bottom. Then we're going to take the blueberries, put them on, and then we're going to dollop, spread out on top, the rest of the filling. And I don't measure this out, I just sort of eyeball it. I want to make sure I have enough for the bottom, because that's what supports everything. And I use what's called a bent angled spatula. The bent angle spatula, they come in different widths and sizes and lengths. This is a smaller one. And this helps me get into the pan a little easier. Helps me spread it out. And you just sort of want an even layer all across the bottom. Now, if you don't have a bent angle spatula or something to help you do this, you can wet your hands a little bit and spread it out with your hands. It's a little messier, but it works just the same. And a lot of times I do that if I'm in a hurry. I'll just use my hands. If you haven't done it already, your oven, per the recipe, says to heat the oven to 375 degrees. And that is actually our first step on this. I had it already preheating while we were doing our filling. So as you can see, I have it spread out. You don't want any of the bottom showing. If you have any of the bottom showing, the blueberry, when you cook it, could leak through, and then you have a blueberry layer on the bottom, which could burn. So now I will go get our filling for the top. And I use that same bent angle to spread the blueberries out. Now I take 2 spoons and I just start dolloping. I wonder if that's really a verb. Dolloping the batter all across the top. Doesn't have to be too uniform, because it's very hard to spread this when on top of the blueberry filling. So instead of making a mess, and you can sort of spread them out once you drop them with the spoons, but you can't really dig down too much, otherwise the filling starts pushing up. What's great with most things like this, even if it doesn't come out perfect, it'll still come out tasting yummy. Now we place this in the oven for 30 minutes or until lightly browned on top, and then we can enjoy it. Timer just went off. I'm gonna check it. Now this has been 30 minutes. And what I like to see is some darkness, just like the edges starting to brown a little bit. I can see a little bit here, but the rest is pretty much the same. So I'm just going to put it back in for about 5 more minutes. The timer just went off. Let's check on it. So it's done. It's hard to see a little bit, but it is darker around some of the edges. They've browned up a little bit more. The filling's bubbling like a pie filling would. So it is done. Now all we have to do is let it cool and we can enjoy them. A nice evening treat if you wanted to. You can make some nice cream with some frozen bananas and have a scoop of that with a bar in the evening for a treat. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please try it. If you like it, let me know. And see you guys in my kitchen real soon.